あのバッジを見ろ、海賊ども。あのマークは4つの海とグランドラインにある170カ国以上の加盟国の結束を示すもの。これが世界だ。立てつくにはお前らがどれほどちっぽけな存在だか分かったか。この女がどれほど巨大な組織に追われてきたか分かったか。
ロビンの敵はよく分かった。ソゲキング、あの旗撃ち抜け。
了解。新兵器巨大パチンコ矢をかぶと、その威力とくと見よう。視察ファイヤーバードスタ
まさか。
完了。
やりやがった。あいつら旗への攻撃の意味が分かってんのか。海賊たちが世界政府に宣戦布告しやがった。正気が貴様ら全世界を敵に回して生きられると思うなよ。
望むところだ。
This clip is often considered one of the greatest and most iconic moments in One Piece because it captures the very essence of the manga. In this video, we will talk at length about how the anarchist undertones in this scene are representative of the main character's beliefs and what it means for the series. Quick definition: anarchism is a political philosophy that advocates for the abolition of all forms of government and the establishment of a society based on voluntary cooperation and mutual aid. And I want to make an important distinction before we begin. Although it is sometimes mistaken for it, anarchism is not the abolition of all rules and the complete absence of order. Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with One Piece, here's a little overview. One Piece is a manga series written by Eiichiro Oda and was first published in the Weekly Shonen Jump magazine in 1997. It later got adapted into an anime series by the animation studio Toei, and is still an ongoing series with over 1070 manga chapters and 1045 anime episodes. It is the world's most successful manga, selling over 500 million copies worldwide, and is widely appreciated for its complex story and world building, exciting action sequences, and compelling characters. But unlike most other shonen manga, a genre of manga targeting an audience of teenage boys, it does also offer a deep insight into political conflicts and delivers a nuanced social commentary on freedom, self-determination, and power structures. And the idea that anarchism could be featured in such an influential manga without much being said about it is just so fascinating to me that I decided to do some research about it, and this is how I came up with this analysis. So in this video, we will try and understand how the anarchist ideology is portrayed in One Piece, and especially in its protagonist, Monkey D. Luffy. But before we dive into this character analysis, a few things have to be said about One Piece. It is an inherently subversive story from its first chapter, as its main character is a pirate, which is the very antithesis of order and law. And with little surprise, One Piece's most central theme is the conflict between freedom and authority, or more specifically, absolute freedom versus absolute authority. Pirates represent absolute freedom to do whatever they want without consequences, while the world government, a totalitarian regime hiding behind a democratic appearance, is fueled by oppression and control over the people. Basically, lawlessness or absolutism, twisted freedom versus total order. But one thing stands in the middle of this decades-old conflict in the story of One Piece: the main character Monkey D. Luffy and his pirate crew, the Straw Hats. While the Straw Hats do not blindly follow a moral compass of what's right and wrong, and mostly act based on what they feel like doing, they tend to do good and inspire others in their path. The story consistently portrays them as a positive force for good, fighting for their own freedom and the freedom of others. Even Luffy's childhood dream seems to be a world where everyone is equal and free to do their own thing, but where no one forces their will onto other people. And while this is an idealized and unrealistic view of the world, it is the purest idea of freedom, and encapsulates one of the core themes of anarchism, a free and equal society. On a more personal level, his own crew is also representative of this absence of hierarchy. He is, of course, respected as the captain of the crew, but is also treated as an equal by his crewmates, and is frequently made fun of in a friendly way. And Luffy applies the same logic to anyone he meets. He either does not understand hierarchy or doesn't care, so he will treat the king of a nation in just the same way he would one of his crewmates. And this might just be the closest to Luffy's idea of a perfect world, in other words his ideology, that we can get for now as we wait for the story to end. In the broader narrative, such ideas can be found again and again. When Luffy declares war on the world government to retrieve his crewmate Nico Robin, when he breaks out of a prison and infiltrates the naval base marine fort to save his brother Ace, and basically any time he sets foot in a new island controlled by a tyrannical figure. What I'm getting at is, the Straw Hat Pirates never fail to side with the oppressed, and often end up overthrowing corrupt governments when they stand in their way. This makes them outcasts, even among pirates, because they aren't bound by any rule and refuse to submit to any authority other than their own. They are their own masters, do not believe in any god, and answer to no one. Basically the perfect embodiment of the French anarchist slogan, ni Dieu ni maître, neither god nor master. In a true pirate fashion, the reasoning behind the Straw Hats' compassionate and anarchist actions is rarely ever altruistic, and they don't hesitate to steal, release dangerous criminals, or sometimes even kill. So their actions are not motivated by morals, but rather by interest and friendship. If you've read the manga or watched the anime, you'll know that anyone Luffy has ever helped has done something for him, even as minor as giving him food. And anyone Luffy has ever fought has hurt his friends in some way. Luffy doesn't care about the big picture, and mostly thinks on an individual level. If someone is in the way of his or his friend's dreams or goals, then he will fight his way out. If not, he sees no reason to actively engage in conflict. It really is that simple for him. And this is what sets him apart from his father, who is the head of a revolutionary army aiming to overthrow the world nobles. He does not inherently believe that governments are bad on principle, nor feels a moral obligation to help and liberate people he doesn't know. All he ever does is for his or his friend's sake, and in the end all Luffy wants is to become the Pirate King, which means the freest man on the sea. The only reason he keeps fighting corrupt governments and individuals is because his personal goals align with the interests of the people he meets on his journey. Yes, he does encounter countless issues of tyranny, slavery, genocide, racism, war, inequality, corruption, and extreme violence, and he almost always ends up confronting the oppressors in a way that ultimately frees the people around him. But it's mostly because they stand in his way towards freedom. So, while the narrative makes Luffy the symbol of a revolution, of a new dawn, he does not want it that way. He doesn't view himself as a hero, and doesn't want to be seen as such. So, is Luffy an anarchist? Well, I would tend to say yes, but with reservations. While Luffy does stand up to oppressive authority, and believes in the inherent goodness of people, whose autonomy and freedom he fights for, he is not an anarchist in the strict sense of the term. For one thing, Luffy does not himself believe in anarchism, and probably doesn't even know what it means. He only does what he wants to do, which just so happens to align with the core principles of anarchism. So, all this considered, I would argue he is anarchist by narrative, rather than by design. Basically, the overarching plot of the story makes his actions align with anarchism. But there are many types of anarchism, and I believe Luffy is an individual anarchist. This ideology consists of three main aspects. First, the concentration on the individual and their will, in preference to any construction such as morality, ideology, social custom, religion, metaphysics, ideas, or the will of others. Second, the rejection of, or reservations about, the idea of revolution, seeing it as a time of mass uprising which could bring about new hierarchies, and the promotion of alternate experiences outside the current social system. And third, the view that relationships with other persons or things can be in one's own interest only, and can be as transitory and without compromise as desired. According to these criteria, I think Luffy is the perfect example of an individual anarchist. Look, he acts based on his own will, and is not guided by any moral or ideological compass. He doesn't directly support his father's drive for revolution, because it's not what he seeks, and his interpersonal interactions or friendships are based on mutual interests. The only thing holding me back from fully calling him an anarchist is the fact that he sees no problem with governments, usually monarchies, as long as they are considered legitimate and harmless in their story, which is not how genuine anarchists would behave. As to how anarchism is portrayed in the manga, It looks pretty obvious to me that it's depicted in a positive way. The main character of the story displays many aspects of this ideology, and we are meant to resonate and empathize with him as he strives towards his goal. He's also very much likable and relatable in a lot of ways. But if anarchism is so blatant in One Piece, then why is it so scarcely talked about? Well, in my opinion, this can be explained by three major factors: technique, production, and reception. A first explanation for the lack of discourse surrounding anarchism in One Piece might just be its technique. In the eyes of many, One Piece is just a silly little pirate story with a goofy art style and a rather simple plot, which is a rubber boy looking for a pirate treasure. Such a perception of the manga may lead the readers to consider that its politics are just as simple, meaning they won't dig deeper and realize just how political, layered, and complicated One Piece truly is. Besides, the fact that One Piece is a manga, a type of media often regarded as childish, probably doesn't help. Now, on the production side, One Piece is owned by the company Shueisha, which publishes every new chapter in its magazine, Weekly Shonen Jump. And since it is targeted towards a younger audience, political messages and ideas tend to remain subtle in shonen, or else publication could be cancelled, as it might not attract as many readers. This is not as much of an issue for One Piece, because it is so popular it cannot be cancelled so easily, but it might explain some of the story choices Oda made early on to not risk cancellation. Last but not least is the reception. Oda knows that most One Piece readers are teenage boys, who are mostly interested in exciting fights and compelling action scenes. Of course, boys grow up and become more interested in other aspects of the story, like world building, complex politics, and character relationships. But the fact of the matter is, young boys were drawn to the manga, and still are, because of the excitement it made them feel. So Oda knew he couldn't add too many explicit political aspects into his story if he wanted his audience to stick around. These reasons might also explain what's been a contradiction in my eyes for a long time. Readers resonate so much with Luffy and have such a dominant reading of the story because they seem to agree with the narrative and they want Luffy to succeed, yet they struggle to realize the political scope of the series. I don't know what could be the reason behind it, but if you have any other idea as to why anarchism and politics in general are so overlooked in discussions about One Piece, please let me know. And thanks for watching this video.